Marc, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you on our SDG Impact Stories. Could you please quickly introduce yourself?
Great, thank you for having me. My name is Marc Friedman. I am the Chief Revenue Officer at buildOn. I've been part of the organization since it was founded 31 years ago.
Wow.
Started off I left the corporate world. I started off as a volunteer and then board member, and in 1997, when I left the corporate world, I was the third employee at buildOn. We now have over 500 people working for us, and it's been quite a journey.
Wow, yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So how would you describe buildOn in just a few words?
Our mission at buildOn is to break the cycle of poverty, illiteracy, and low expectations through service and education.
Okay.
We do this by running service learning programs in under-resourced high schools across the United States. We're in Boston, Bridgeport, Connecticut, the South Bronx, Detroit, Chicago, and Oakland. We also we also build schools in developing countries. We're working in Haiti, Guatemala, Nicaragua. We're in Senegal, Burkina Faso, Mali, Malawi, and Nepal.
Okay, that's a lot of countries.
Yeah, it is.
Congrats. So yeah, that he already said, no? Okay. So how exactly are you able to achieve this breaking cycle of the poverty? Can you explain in more depth what's your methodology behind it?
Sure. Globally, we build primary schools in these 8 developing countries that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And there is a methodology that has been refined over the years that includes school construction, adult literacy, and an enroll program, bringing students who are out of school back to school.
Yeah. Are there any topics that you focus on more specifically?
Well, I can elaborate on our school construction program. In order to identify and qualify a village, it starts 6 months before we break ground on a school.
Okay.
We meet with the community leaders. We talk about the need to establish a project leadership committee of equal number of women and men, and the need to gather the local materials, the river rocks and the sand, and that water be accessible. We also talk about the fact that we need to have at least 50% girls attending the schools and 50% of the leadership committee women.
Okay. That's great.
Yeah. And then after that 6 months, when we're ready to break ground on the school, we all gather for this big celebration. And they're singing and dancing, but the whole focus is on signing that covenant, which again talks about what buildOn will do. We supply the skilled labor and the materials. The community supplies the unskilled labor, and the Ministry of Education supplies the teachers and the desks and the books.
Okay.
We all come together, we sign the covenant. Many or most people in these communities are illiterate, so they're going to thumbprint that covenant, and then the next day we start to break ground on their school.
Okay.
And we do it in solidarity with the community.
That's amazing. I think it's really great to kind of, take into account what the community needs locally and to adapt the building, the program, etc., according to the people over there. And so you mentioned the community leaders. How does that work? How do you select them? How many are there? Is it easy to find them? Because they have to be pretty knowledgeable, I think, about their community.
Yeah, they're people from within their community, and our team, a team of 3, would be assigned to that community from day one, and they go from hut to hut and explain what we're planning to do, and they would start to recruit the leadership team. And of course, we'll talk to the elders in the community to identify the appropriate people. Yeah. And once they're identified, then they start to meet on a regular basis, and they become the leadership team that will sustain this program for years and years. And ultimately, we feel that our schools are built to last 100 years.
Yeah.
And so far, we've built over 2,100 schools, and only 3 of them are not in
running
operation now, and they were wiped out in natural disasters.
Okay.
But otherwise, we have a very, very solid track record of sustainability.
I think that's a very strong point that you have, and of trying to, with the goal of building schools for 100 years, I think that basically just kind of sets the, the path of how you want to do it from the start, and you're not imposing a program like from the West or anything that is not adapted to them. I think that's a very great, differentiator that you have.
Thank you. I would also like to add that in terms of the curriculum, the Ministry of Education dictates the curriculum.
Okay.
We do not have anything to do with the curriculum. So when you mentioned the
That's
West,
right.
that's not us. We are there to provide access to education because we believe that education is the first rung on your journey out of extreme poverty.
Yeah.
So once education is established in those communities, then there is a path to breaking that cycle of poverty.
Yeah, I believe what I read about the buildOn is that when you build a school, you try to, it's going to look alike another school that is in the area.
We follow a model that is approved by the local Ministry of Education in each of our countries that we work in. And if you look on our website, buildon.org, you'll see different photos. Our schools look different depending on which country we're in, but it all follows an approved methodology and model, and then we implement. So if you were to go to Senegal, you would see so many buildOn schools in one district that all look the same, but the impact that they are having is enormous.
Yeah, so it's maybe standardized in one country, but not between the countries.
Correct.
I think, okay. Thanks, Marc, for your answer. More specifically, how do you coordinate with the local communities? Would you have an example on how this is being done?
Well, two examples. First, in terms of how we coordinate with the local Ministry of Education to identify the communities where we build schools, they have a list where they prioritize where they're going to send teachers. We have our own list of where we know that communities qualify for a school. We compare lists, and many times they will defer to us, because if you think about it, in the Buguni district of Mali, we have built over 200 schools. The local Ministry of Education, all he needs to do is make sure that they provide the teachers. And he's got the budget for the teachers anyways. So why not put him in the buildOn communities? It makes sense. He looks like a hero. And more importantly, the kids are getting educated.
Yeah, so it's very collaborative with the local government.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then in terms of, I wanted to share a story from Guatemala.
Yeah.
I was recently in Guatemala just a few weeks ago, and we were on the work site digging the foundation, blisters from the pickaxe, and two teachers from a community about a 4-hour ride away on a motorcycle appeared at our community early in the morning, which meant that they got up really early because they wanted to petition us to come and build a school in their community the next time. And they had a document with signed thumbprints or signatures from their community demonstrating their ability and willingness to provide the unskilled labor and the materials and agreeing to 50% girls attending those schools. So that was just like an incredible show of solidarity from what they want and what buildOn is able to help them to provide.
That's really great, and it makes the work easier for you.
Yeah.
You don't have to go scouting for, for where you can help and where it would work. They already prepared everything that you needed. They
did. They were well prepared.
So I have another more tricky question, which is around the topic of volunteerism. We hear about that a lot nowadays. There's been, I think, also when people apply for colleges, it always looks good on their paper to go build a school or help an orphanage here and there. But there's this discussion on the news or in the press, which basically says that sometimes volunteerism causes more harm than good. So, what is your take or buildOn's take on this, and how do you ensure that it's not that, and that it doesn't seem like like that's what you're doing? Because I know it's not.
It's absolutely not. buildOn does not run a volunteerism trip. What I can tell you is that through the buildOn Trek program, people raise funds and then go live in a community in solidarity with the community that they are literally working side by side to help build that school.
Yeah.
And all 2,100 schools that we have built, except those 3, are up and running. And approximately 50% of each school pre-pandemic that we would run or that we would build were with groups of either students or adults or corporations that wanted to have an impact on breaking that cycle of poverty, and they did so through the TREC program.
And how long on average do they usually stay? Or
1 to 2 weeks. At the
2 weeks,
beginning of the project is when they're there. And so corporations such as Synchrony and Salesforce and LinkedIn and PwC and GE have all sent groups of their employees over to build schools.
That's really great for you and great for the communities.
I was in Nepal, it must have been 20 years ago, and I was with a few of our buildOn team members, and we were walking from one community to another, and I think it was like a 6 or a 7 hour hike, and along the way we happened upon another community, and there was an abandoned school there.
Right.
And we were like, wow, this is crazy. Why is a school abandoned in an area where education is, so under-resourced? And we stopped and we asked the local leaders, and they said that another group had come in, and without consulting with the community, they had just decided to build a school way up the mountain from where the community was. And, in terms of volunteerism, they just came in and did this. And it wasn't sustainable because it was abandoned, because the community was not involved. And if you look at our methodology, it starts 6 months before we break ground on a school, where we are developing that community and working alongside of them to ensure that once we break ground on the school, there's community participation, and then it's sustainable for 100 years to go.
Yeah, that's a great example of putting in contrast buildOn and volunteerism. Thank you.
We call that a value add.
A value add. Okay, good to know.
Well, what I think is so unique about the buildOn methodology is that a group of students or adults will come in and will be there for the first week or two of the project. The project takes about 3 months to fully build a school. So these community members, 30 people per day, at least 50% women, are on that site every day building their school, even after our team has left. And that's the key to sustainability. It's that community involvement.
Definitely, because also if they're part of the building, the construction, then they know where the stones are. I'm just using a metaphor, but
right.
If the volunteers who came here just for 1 or 2 weeks, and 1 year later, 2 years later, there's damage in the school from I don't know, natural disaster or something like this, then the local community knows how to rebuild the school in case or yeah.
I wanted to share a story about the community I was in Guatemala a few weeks ago. And I was on the work site, and I was pickaxing. And I was working along a community member. His name is Roberto. And he's 65 years old. And he was determined to build this school for his grandchildren, who right now are walking 90 minutes to get to a school.
Wow.
And when it rains, and the rainy season up in the mountains in Guatemala is 4 months long. So they were arriving at school, and it was cold and wet and not conducive to learning. So he was determined to build a school in his community for his grandchildren. But he was a little frail. Yeah. And so usually on the work site, it's the community members who are taking the pickaxe out of my hand because they have way more endurance than I do. But in this case, at one point, he was pickaxing, and he was going as hard as he could, and he looked up at me, and he handed me the pickaxe, and he said, you do now. And I did, and it was just really beautiful moment of solidarity between a community member and myself. And then, the day we were leaving, the community was out on the site working as we were packing up to head out.
Right.
And Roberto was out there, working his hardest with that pickaxe, determined to make sure that school got built for his grandchildren.
That's a great example, and thank you so much. And on that topic of his grandchildren who had to walk 90 minutes all the way to their schools, what are the most common factors actually that prevent children from attending school? What exactly can be done to overcome those barriers? What do you see?
Well, we have a enroll program that we implemented to recruit kids who are out of school to come back to school.
Yeah.
And we go from house to house, from hut to hut, and we talk to the adults about why it's important to educate their children. And through the Enroll program, again, when I was in Guatemala, I was able to speak to 6 of the kids who we had just recently recruited to come back to school. And I asked them why were they not in school. The first talked about how his parents wanted him to help plant the crops. Another talked about how he needed to help with the animals. Another talked about how she needed to help with the chores right at their own compound.
Right.
And then I asked them, now that they're back in school, what was their aspiration educationally? One talked about being a nurse, another a doctor, another a teacher. And for the first time in my 31 years of doing this, one of the boys said he wanted to be a salesman.
Right.
And I'd never heard that before, and I thought that was so cool that he wanted to be a salesman. I want to sign him up to be a fundraiser for buildOn.
Yeah.
But then the last question I asked was, once you're educated, where are you going to go? And all 6 of them said they would come back to their community. They wouldn't go out to Guatemala City or to immigrate to the United States. They were very dedicated to their own community and wanted to come right back
community.
home. Yeah.
That's amazing. So what about the adults? What?
My favorite part.
How are you helping them to access education?
Yeah, thank you. That's a beautiful question. Our adult literacy program is an incredible program. It runs in many of our communities over a 2-year period in between the planting and the harvesting of the crops.
Okay.
It's designed to teach adults, most of whom are illiterate, how to read, how to write, how to do simple math. It teaches them about the local history, about health and hygiene.
Yeah.
And after 2 years, they graduate, and 84% of those that are in adult literacy are women. Upon graduation, each group is given a stipend of $750, and there's a beautiful community in Senegal that I happen to have been in, Naranjourer, where that $750 was used to invest in soap so that they could make shea butter, and in materials to make clothing. The adult literacy participants would go to the market and sell the clothing and the shea butter. Over 2 years, that $700 turned into $9,000, which was invested back in their own community to pay for the school supplies, the school fees, and because the kindergarten teacher is not paid for by the Ministry of Education, to pay for a kindergarten teacher. Just a wonderful example of adult literacy in action.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting way how you've come up with that program, because what I see is that you're not only building a school for the community, but you're also giving them the tools for the entire community to then just become responsible, and enabling them to have jobs and to create a local economy and make it function. So it's really a foundation that they need.
It is on a more basic level.
Yeah.
I was in Mali several years ago, and whenever I go overseas, I love to spend time in the adult literacy programs. Yeah. And it was at night, and we were using kerosene lanterns, and there were 100 people crammed into one classroom. Most of them were women, and many of them had babies that they lined up on the floor under the chalkboard because they don't have any babysitters. And they were determined to learn how to read and write. And my host mom was there, and she got up that morning at 4 a.m., started to pound the millet and make breakfast for everyone. Then she came out and worked on the work site, and then she went home and made dinner. And then at 7 o'clock, she goes to adult literacy. And when she came home, I asked her, why, after doing all this, is this so important to you? And she said, my children have gone to Bamako, to the capital, and they send letters back to me. And I'm illiterate, and I don't know how to read. And I have someone else reading me the letters. I want to be able to read those letters myself.
Right. Yeah.
So it's basic literacy in addition to what I talked about earlier.
And so they come in the evenings, these adults. sorry, can maybe you can elaborate on the way you build the school so that you can have it's evening classes, right, for the adults?
They're either after school or in the evening.
Okay.
They come to do the adult literacy program, right?
Yeah, that's right. I read on the buildOn page how for in the evenings you use I think solar panels or just like
now we do, yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting way to you think ahead, like you think of integrating some sort of renewable energy that makes it possible in all the communities to have this adult literacy program if they need it.
So I'll just elaborate that in some of our communities we were able to get a donation for solar to light up the schools. Okay. We don't have it in all of our communities. Okay. So if someone out there wants to donate solar to buildOn or to the schools, please call us.
So according to you, what are the biggest challenges in the most developing countries that make it hard to break the circle of poverty you mentioned?
First, let me say that our 25-year vision, which we laid out in 2016, was to ensure that every girl and boy in every buildOn country has a seat in a primary school. Not that buildOn was going to be the one that built all of the primary schools, but that we would partner with others to do so, and that we would partner with the Ministry of Education. Right, exactly. So resources are needed to do that. So it would be financial resources, but there's a great story from Malawi. In 1993, buildOn built its first school in Malawi. On their own, the community then went on and built 4 more schools. So there are now 5 schools in the Somali village, one from buildOn. That was the ignition to motivate those community members to go out and find the resources to build those additional 4 schools. So the resources can come from the United States, they can come from the community themselves, and it can come from both, which I think is a beautiful part of ensuring that the model that buildOn has established is sustainable. And we have a proven record of that for the last 31 years. Yeah,
and then it's knowing or ensuring that the resources are well invested in this sustainable methodology that you have. So why is education so important? Why is that your main focus? We feel that education is the first rung into breaking the cycle of poverty. If you look at a ladder, you've got to educate the children. You've got to educate the women and the girls because they are the strength in every community. And once you educate them, it's proven that resources become available, literacy rates rise, and they start to break that cycle of poverty. So there's a multiplier effect. Right. So what is your impact in numbers at buildOn? Over the first 31 years, buildOn has built almost 2,100 schools. 3.6 million volunteer work days have been contributed to build those 2,100 schools. Today, while we are here, there are more than 276,000 children, parents, grandparents, and adults attending those schools. 49% are women or girls. That's really great. Congratulations on that. Thanks so much. So to close our wonderful discussion we just had, could you describe buildOn in 3 words? We build hope. A great one. Thank you so much, Marc. Do you have any last words, anything you want to mention? Well, first I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come and to have this really important conversation. I encourage everyone who wants to help to break the cycle to do so. It doesn't have to be with buildOn. We'd love to have you join the movement at buildon.org, but if not, get out there and do something. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Thank you so much, Marc. You're welcome.